So anyway, Allie got a lot of this correct. So basically, with the sort of the pathway to all of this, I'm going to start at the very beginning. So this is what the original image was. So her first step into this was to actually create a separate, a clean background. So a clean plate is the way most people would actually refer to this part. So, and there's a million ways of doing it. In this case, she did it with generative fill. That's one way to do it. Content aware is another way. We haven't really looked at content aware a lot in this class, but we will get to that. And then she sews a figure out and then does her liquefy on it. You'll see that she has made this a smart object, which is a great thing because that allows you to go back into liquefy and continue to actually work on it. Now, when I come into liquefy like this, you can see I've got a mesh that's showing up on my screen. We need to talk about this mesh. So to see it, if you come into liquefy, which is where I am right now, there's a whole set of viewing options that sit here. So one is to say show the image, which most people want to do. The other is this show mesh right here. This is the mesh. It looks like a screen. You can see down here. This is what it actually looks like before you do any liquefying on it. And this is the whole way that liquefy works. So if you imagine taking an image and gluing it to a window screen, and then you distort the window screen, that's what distorts the image. So Photoshop has no idea anything about this image. It doesn't know that there's a figure there. It doesn't know any of that. All Photoshop knows is when we're in this liquefy workspace is that this image has been adhered to this screen, and then you distort the screen. And the reason I tell you that is that it's really sort of a great way to actually look to see what has really happened in this image. So you can see the distortions in the screen in this area right here are the most extreme, but that's because this is the most extreme work that was done on this image. Again, that her, you know, the shape of her booty out there, I mean, that it's a part of the clothes. I mean, it's not her physical body. That's actually constructed in the garment itself. But you can see that the majority of the work has been done here, but this is also a place that you can look to see where there might be problems. So I come in and take a look right here, and you can see these little bumps that are right in here. That's what's causing this sort of like scalloped edge part right here. So you can also retouch at this stage of the game as well. So for me, when I look at these things, some of those are natural folds and close, and that's fine. But some of it looks like you've liquefied it. So to fix this part, I would actually go and grab the smooth tool. I typically will bring the pressure and the rate of those down pretty far. I'm going to use a pretty small brush on this as well. And so then I can scrub just in this area to smooth this part out. And that's all it really takes here. So when you show the mesh, it's a quick way to spot where there might be problems and also to be able to do the work. Now you can turn the mesh off and you can see this is the difference in what just happened. And again, this is typically the way that I work with this stuff. If you turn on show mesh, you can see mine is red right now. You don't have to keep a red color. So let's say you're working on an image that's dominated by red. You can change this to any color you want. So I can make it blue. Again, much harder to see for me, or magenta, possibly easier to see. But at any rate, you can also change the size of your mesh. So you can do a really small one, that's what it looks like, or a really big one. All of this depends on the resolution of your image in terms of where it really ultimately maps out. But at any rate, I just wanted to show everybody that this is what's going on in here. This is what is actually allowing liquefy to do the work that it actually does. But you can spot other things. So you can see, for instance, here that the distortion in this background is serious right here. But if you take a look at what Allie did, she's actually masked all of that out. She's just then selected her figure in this image, whatever, and put a layer mask on it. Couple things that I like about this. Again, I think that the back should be smooth just a little bit, but I love the little flip in the fabric here at the end. There's little things like that. Just it makes it believable for me, right? So anyway, it's just something I wanted to point out to you guys. I want to show you Dasha's next. So we haven't gotten too much into AI in this class. We will. So typically when I've done this kind of work before, I'm going to go down to the very bottom of her layers palette. And you can see a before and after here as well. This is what it looked like before. This is what it looks like after, whatever. I thought this one was also extremely well done. But you can see in this case, she's actually done the liquefy part first. So she's modified the figure first. And this is what ends up happening. So if we take a look, this is where the image was, and this. And you can see there's all sorts of distortion in this background. But then in her upper layers, this is where she's using generative AI here to actually rebuild the background, and also using layer masks on that generative AI to sculpt it, to actually only have it impacting the background part. And she does this multiple times to clean up multiple parts. And this is the first time I've ever seen anybody do it this way, whatever, and it was just really, really, really well done. It's really smart a way to approach it. So it's kind of a 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. You can build your background plate first, or you can do it after the fact. Either way, it works. In this case, it's possibly even a little bit smarter, only because you're really mapping the background to the figure after you've done the figure. If you do it the other way around, where you create your background plate first and then you do your figure, it's like you may have to go back in after the fact and still do a little bit more work on your background, so that it doesn't, parts of it don't become obvious that that's ultimately what you're doing. But anyway, I love the fact that both of these were sort of like going in, they were two different approaches that I thought were pretty successful for both. One other thing I wanted to show everybody about on this, again, a lot of you, I was commenting back on this, that I didn't think that the upper body was proportional to the lower body, that there was still some really weird everybody got the top of the body pretty well done, because the whole humpback thing was pretty evident how to fix that, or the curve, the contour that you're really looking for. But the lower body was just everybody sort of like went after that really big hump on, well, here, this. Everybody went after this part up here, which is pretty obvious, and everybody went after this part right here. But the people who kept tweaking this on a little bit also pushed in the front just a little bit to make it more proportionate. There was so that the lower half of the body fit the upper half of the body. And it's just one of those things that you need to do. You need to step back from this stuff and look at it and just say, does that make sense to me? Does somebody who's got that skinny of a top, would they have that not skinny of a bottom? Those sorts of things. So those are just the judgments that you actually ultimately make in all of this. So I just wanted to point that part out. Really quickly, I want to do the knockout assignment that we did. There was a lot of stuff that was all over the place, but we have done this same sort of work long enough that I want to just make sure that everybody is good with this. It'll be the last time that we really do this kind of work. But for all of you who are planning on doing composites, which is, it seems like a lot of you, I want to make sure that that you're comfortable with how this whole thing works. So if you can go back into, we're going to bang this out really quickly, guys. I'm not going to take it all the way to the very ultimate end, but I do want to, I take that back. Let's take a break. Let's just do it right now. Let's, I've got 203. Let's make it a hard 10. Can be back at 213, and we'll jump in with that assignment. Okay, so if we could go to your week number 8, session number 8 folder. In the assignment folder, it's actually the green screen test.psd. If you can drag that on into Photoshop, or if you're lucky and you've only got one version of Photoshop, simply double click on it and it'll open up. So I'm going to double click on the hand here, and this is where we're going to start. Is everybody good with this guy? Anybody not able to find this image? Okay, hang on one second. Let me get my tab. Say what? It's 8. No, it's in 8. Yeah. It's in 8 in the assignment folder called Green Screen Test. Okay, once you get in here, We're going to run our zero selective color action on this. So you simply need to go to your action palette and find this. If you have somehow lost your zero selective color action set, then just watch this, but hopefully you've still got it. It's something you want to hang on to. And then once you select the parent part again, you don't open this up and start selecting in the middle part where it says make adjustment, because you're starting in the middle of the action. You need to make sure that you have the parent selected, and then click on the arrow that is pointing towards the right at the bottom of the actions palette, and it will run it. If you get something like I'm getting right here where it looks solarized, it's only because you don't have the relative radio button. I mean, you don't have the absolute radio button selected in the properties panel of your selected color adjustment layer. So just click on absolute and you will. Then we are going to go to the drop down menu for colors and come down to greens. Yes. No. So that's a good point. So here, let me tell you really quickly here. I think we looked at this before as well. There is, anybody need to get on the sign-in sheet that's not on? Great, thanks. People use blue screen just as much as they use, not just as much as they use green screen, but it's an alternative to green screen. And the reason they use both of those is that all skin tone, it doesn't matter whether you're Caucasian, African American, it does not matter what, your skin has a lot of red in it. And so what they try to do, the reason they use green or blue is they're looking at the color wheel and they're trying to get something as far away from that red as they can get, because they don't want to select your skin. That's the big thing, right? So the difference in using blue or green only has to do with other things that are in the image. So for instance, if I was shooting somebody who was all in green clothes, I would not want to use a green screen because it would select their clothes as well. I would go to a blue screen. So, and the same thing, if I had somebody who was dressed all in blue, I would not want to use a blue screen, I would go to a green screen. But the truth to be told, you can actually get away with other colors as well. They're not as effective because, again, they're not opposite red, which is what really, that's where this whole thing came from. So, green is far more common. You just see it everywhere. I've always used green. I've never used blue screen. But the other thing that happens too is that green is not really super common. I mean, take a look around this room. There's nobody wearing green in this room, right? There's some blue in this room, but no green. So I don't think. Am I wrong? Well, not green like that green. No, I didn't mean like sagey. No, that's not, no. I meant like this green. Would you really buy something? Anyway, no. Green is not really friendly to skin tones either, by the way. It makes you look sick. Anyway. All right, so moving on. So again, I've got a completely black image right now because what I've done in this action is it's taken every one of these colors and every one of these tonal ranges and filled those ranges with completely black ink. That's, sorry, I'm killing my, anyway. So then the trick is, we're going to use the green drop-down menu and we're going to grab the black slider and drag it all the way to the left, which essentially fills the green of the image with white ink. And that's why this background has just gotten lighter. Now, the reason this didn't go pure white is because this is not a pure green background. So if we zoom into the hair, this is the challenging part in every image. This is always what I go in to look at first. So I'm looking at the hair part right here. If you take a look at the edge of her sleeve, I'm not worried about the knockout there. For that matter, I could actually go in and get that with a pen tool. But this is the real challenge up in here. So I zoom in to really look to see what's actually happening in this layer part right here. This is the part that matters to me. So this is what I look at when I do the next step. So the next step is to actually select the hue saturation layer that's underneath the selective color layer. So click on it to make it active. And the reason I'm using this is that I want to make the green more saturated, because if the green gets to be a more pure green, then the impact that the selective color layer on top of it is having will actually push it more towards white. So that's the goal in all of this. Now, this is a new hue and saturation dialog box. This came out just last year. Don't let this thing daunt you. If you ignore the primary colors that are sitting right up at the very top, right here, it's the same as the old box. It doesn't look any different than the old box. So don't let this stuff up here throw you right now. I am going to use the targeting selection tool. It's the little hand with the arrow that's pointing right and left. That's right next to the word that says default. I'm going to click on that. Make sure that you do have the hue saturation layer active. And then I'm going to come over and I'm going to click on it. You can see I'm hovering over my image, and I get a little eyedropper tool. That's going to select a color for me. And you'll see if you click on that color right now, you get a whole set of green range. It's sitting right down here. This is where the selection, this is the color range that we have just selected when we clicked on that. I'm going to click and then drag this thing towards the right. That as in, you will see the saturation slider in the middle of this hue saturation, that by default is the one that moves. Now, there are other ways that you can use keyboard shortcuts to actually have hue change when you're actually dragging, or lightness change. I don't bother with those. I simply go in and adjust those myself. But this one that actually selects hue and allows me to actually saturate it, you can see my background is now getting lighter. And I'm going to continue to do this part. But what I'm looking at right here, if you take a look at this image right now up here in the corner, right here on this side, this is a point where there's enough spill in her hair that it's actually beginning to flip. So the hair is actually becoming lighter than the background. That is an impossibility for me, right? All this little hair right here. You'll see I'm going to pull my saturation back down so you can actually see all these little hairs. It's these little hairs that are actually in here. If you push the saturation too far, I'm going to crank it all the way, you can see it totally destroys this line in here. The hair starts to pull apart. There are parts of the hair in here now that are actually lighter than the background. So when I run levels on this, those things are just they're gonna disappear before my background gets clean. This is far too aggressive of a mask. So I'm looking at this part right here. I'm gonna back my saturation off, watching the whole time until I actually get the hair to return. I need the hair to come back. These little, it doesn't have to be every single little fine hair, like a bunch of these that are up in here in the top. I don't necessarily need those. If I lose those, it's not really going to show up too much. As a matter of fact, as I keep working my way down here, they are always going to be lighter than my background. So I'm simply going to sacrifice those. But any of the ones that are darker than the background, I do not want to lose that part. I don't want my hair to become so fractured that I can't actually work with it. So if you want the same saturation that I've got, it's right around a 50. That's basically what I'm going to go with. I'm going to zip back out before I actually say okay to this. I want to take a look at the other side as well. You can turn your hue saturation slider on and off to see what the impact of it really is. And I feel pretty good about that part. So if this doesn't work, if it turns out that my mask is too aggressive, then you just run this again. I'm going to actually back this off a little bit more. I think I'm losing too much down here as well. So yeah, I'm going to take it down closer to around a 40. And then look at the rest of my image. And the rest of the image is actually looking pretty good for me. So I'm going to simply copy one of my red, green, or blue channels right now. It doesn't matter which one you pick because they are all the same. Again, we have a black and white image right now. That means by definition that the RGB values are exactly the same in all of it. And you can see if you just hover over the background, you'll actually see, the figure itself, whatever. No, never mind. I'm not going to do that because I'm actually on the adjustment layer. If you want to see what the real values are, you've got to select the background layer and then hover over this. I'm going to hover over the background. You can see I'm getting an RGB reading of 114. And if I move everything around, everything is always, the RGB values are always exactly the same because it is a black and white image. So I'm going to just grab the blue channel and I'm going to drag it down on the little square with the plus at the bottom of the channels palette to make a copy of it. It's called Blue Copy. I'm going to double click on Blue Copy name and call it Knockout. And then this way, I've actually got the beginnings of my knockout. Now, I want to run levels on this. The thing is that we've never done this in this class, but you can actually do this and watch this happen in real time. So I'm not going to run levels on my knockout yet. Instead, I'm going to come over to my layers palette. I'm going to throw away those 2 adjustment layers. They've done their job. I don't need them anymore. That part's actually fine. I am going to make a copy of my background layer, Command J to make a copy of it. Then I'm going to select the background, the bottom one, because I want to put a white background. I want to put a layer of white in between these 2 so that I have the virgin on the very bottom. I've got a white background, which will be my new background, and then my image on top that I can actually remove the background and also remove the spill. So click on the bottom background layer so that when you add a new adjustment layer, so I'm going to come down to the icon at the bottom of the layers palette that is the circle that's half white and half black. Click on it, and then I want to add a solid color. The solid color opens up, and typically it picks your foreground color. That's the one it automatically loads. I don't want that to be black, so I'm going to just use once your color picker is open, if you hover your cursor over any color, it'll become an eyedropper tool to sample. I'm going to just click on the background color, and you can see it fills it with white. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. Now, we don't see any change yet because I haven't put a layer mask on this thing yet. So I'm going to come back down to my knockout. And the first thing I'm going to do with my knockout is invert it because I want the background to be hidden and I want the figure to show. And right now, it's just the opposite. Right now, the figure is being hidden and the background will somewhat show. So I'm going to invert this just to start with. And then I'm going to load this as a selection. So I'm going to hover over. See what happened there. Hang on 1 second. What's 255 minus 113? 142. Yeah, so this is correct. All right, so I'm just going to invert this. I'm going to load this now as a selection. So hover over the thumbnail of Knockout. Command click to load this as a selection. And I see it's selecting the whole thing. I'm going to come over here and actually apply it as a layer mask, but I think actually it did do the correct one. So you can see now I've got my image itself against a really light green background. So what I want to watch here is I want to see when I actually run this levels, what happens to this hair up at the very top. So I'm going to select my layer mask right now, and I'm just going to run levels on that. If you want to see it without it being in real time and seeing what it does to your image, you can hold down the Option key and click on it. We're just going to run levels on this. So this gives me an idea of, you can also see I've got contamination in here. She's got a necklace that would actually need to be cleaned out. We'll do that in a little bit. But I'm going to come back here and just set my points to actually run levels on this. So I'm going to come up to the eyedropper tool in my toolbar on the left-hand side. I'm going to click on it and come down to the color sampler tool. I'm going to then click on one of those beads that is actually on her body, because that'll give me, I might as well get all of this in levels. And then I'm going to click on the background. You want to make sure that your sample size is at least a 3x3. In this case, I was watching, when I was looking at a lot of people's work, whatever, the background breaks up pretty badly. Some people will actually change this to a 5x5 just to have a little bit bigger sampler area, but I'm going to go ahead and leave mine as a 3x3. And then I'm going to turn on so that I can actually see this happen. I'm going to click on my figure so that I can see it, and then make sure I go back to my layer mask so that I'm actually doing the levels on that and can watch this happen in real time. So Command L with the levels dial with the mask selected, and I'm going to grab my black point and I'm going to drag it up, and you can see it's starting to clean out this area that's right here in her hair. Again, you need to make a differentiation between spill and her hair. So I'm going to continue to work this up. Again, I don't have my points. I need to change my points. I've got to actually see what numbers I've got here really quickly, guys. Sorry. because I've got 3 points now. So it's 2 and 3 are my points right here. If you had points previously, you'll have them again. But so 2, I'm going to click on the eyedropper in my info palette to drop it down and say I want to see this in RGB. It's reading a 234 right now. I'm going to do my point number 3, also RGB. I'm going to click on that, and that's like a 12. So I'm bringing my slider up till I'm looking at my point number 3. I'm going to get close to 0. In this case, it's such a jump, I'm going to stop at 12, and then I'm going to go to my arrow keys and tap in till I just get to 0. And then I'm going to grab my white point, and I'm going to drag this thing back. And again, this is actually really close to 255 right now. And again, remember, that's the part of the mask that is her body. And I'm going to go to my arrow keys there and tap that in until I just get to 255. And then I want to see what's happening right here at her hair. This part right here. I feel like this can get cleaned out a little bit more. I feel like it doesn't, the background is not really showing through quite so much. So I'm going to continue to push up the black in this. So again, remember, if we take a look, I don't know if I can show you just my layer. No, I can't show you just my layer mask until I say okay on levels. But my background is black. I'm trying to hide that part. So I'm going to amp this up here and just see if that changes, if it cleans it out a little bit more. And you can see it does a little bit better job of cleaning that part out, but still not breaking up the hair. So all the parts that are between the hair have opened up a little bit more. I've got a little stuff of hair down here that's beginning to break apart. I'm going to take a look at the other side. I'm going to back that back off again. I don't feel like that actually helped me a ton. I feel like I'm taking this too far. This seems too aggressive to me. So I'm going to drop it back down. Take a look at the other side. Yeah, if I need to clean that part out a little bit more, I will. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay to this. If you want the same values that I had 150 for my shadow, for my black point, and 244 for my white. And those numbers are the correct ones there. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. So then this is the beginning of my knockout. So I clearly have spill issue that I need to deal with. We will deal with that just on her hair first. So to fix the spill, I'm going to select the pixel layer of this. I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush, B as in boy. I'm going to change the blending mode from normal down to color. 100% opacity, 100% flow, and make sure it is a soft brush, 0% hardness. I'm going to then sample the color of her blonde hair, especially this part that's on the outside here, holding down my option key and simply clicking. That loads the hair color as my foreground color, and then I can simply come in here and start to paint this part down. I resample often so that I don't get just one color of hair. So I'm going to resample and get something a little bit darker and play with that in here a little bit more. And once I get close to the edge of her face or the edge of the boa here as well, I'm going to go to a much harder brush. So something around the 80s, maybe even 90 on there, just so that I don't overspill this color onto her skin. Use my bracket keys to get my brush a little bit smaller and just come down this line of her face here. Avoid her ear. That doesn't need to be fixed. That part does. And so that's basically where I'm going with all of this stuff. And you can see it's actually working pretty well in here. So that's how I begin this whole process here. And that's actually looking like a decent knockout. Again, her hair, part of it is focus because of the resolution that I'm at, but I'm also then going to look at the edge of her body. So I'm going to come in to see if I get that dreaded green line. And this part, I don't see it on this side. I do have spill that's down on the boa, and I actually do have that dreaded green line right here on her hand. You can see it right here. So I'm going to choke this image really quickly just to clean up the part that's on her hand. It's the inside of her hand as well. And I'll see if there's other places that it needs to do it. So to go ahead and choke this thing, I'm going to select my layer mask. And then the first thing I'm going to do is slightly blur it. Again, what I'm trying to do, you don't need to do this. I'm going to show it to you really quickly. That right here, it's the transition right here from the background to her hand. I don't have really any shades of gray in between. I've got very few. There's a couple, but I've got very few. I need more shades of gray so that I can actually do the choke. So again, I'm going to watch this happen in real time. So make sure you're still working on your layer mask. Up to the, before we do this, we're going to actually do a history snapshot. So go back to your history palette. At the very bottom, there's a little camera. You want to click on that. That will create a snapshot in time of what this image looks like. I'm going to scroll all the way up to the very top, double click on this word snapshot number 1, and I'm going to rename it pre-choke. So this is what my image is looking like before I choke it. C-H-O-K-E. And then again, once you name it, go all the way back down and select your history, the bottom of your history again. Because if you don't, you're going to lose all of the history that you did to get to this place. So with a pre-choke state already made, then I'm going to go ahead and choke this thing. So again, working on your layer mask, up to the filter menu, down to blur, down to Gaussian blur. And in my Gaussian blur, a 4 is way too much on this guy, so I'm going to try a 1 first. Then again, I just hover over my keyboard, and that's not enough of a blur. It's not giving me enough shades of gray. So on the delete key, and put in a 2, and the 2 actually is probably enough. I'm going to see what a 3 looks like in here. I think a 3 is too aggressive in this, so I'm going to go back to a 2. So I'm just going to blur it for just a 2 pixel blur on this. Then I'm going to run levels on this, Command L. And what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to, again, I never remember which direction this is. I'm going to grab my black point slider and drag it, and you can see as you start to go towards the middle, it gets rid of that little green line in there. Now, if you did over sharpen your image, if you zoom in on this, you can see my edge here is a little bit soft. You can actually grab your white point slider and also pull that towards the center, which will sharpen that line up. So you can actually, you'll see if you pull this down, and it's bringing some of my green back. So I'm going to grab my black point slider and start to take it more towards the center. But you can control how sharp or soft this line is by bringing those white and black points towards one another. Because what you're doing is you're increasing the contrast of that edge. You're leaving very few gray tones in the middle. If you turn your preview check mark on and off, you can actually see what's beginning to happen here. And it's cleaned out that part pretty well. I want to take a look at the thumb. Yeah, all of that part's actually cleaned out pretty well. If you want the same values that I've got, I put in a 155 for my black point and a 210 for my white. I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. And then I'm going to do a snapshot of this in history. So back over to the history palette, the little camera at the very bottom, click on it, scroll all the way up to the top, and you are going to then, you have a new snapshot number 1. I'm going to double click on that, and I'm going to call this, name it post choke. Now, the majority of my image did not need to be choked. You'll see if you take a look at what this did to the boa at the bottom, it totally destroys that. If you take a look up at the top of her hair, you'll see that it really fucks all of this up really badly here. The majority of my image does not need to be choked. Just a very small parts of it here and there need to be choked. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of my history, and you can see the actual choke happened in the 2 last history states, levels and Gaussian blur. So I'm going to go right back to the state, to the history state right before the Gaussian blur. This brings all of it back, so this image is not choked now. If you zoom in again and you take a look at her hand, you can see that it has not been choked here. But if you go up to the very top, you have got a history state that does have that choke applied to it. You do not want to pick the history state. You want to simply click in the little box to the left of that post-choke history state, so that when you now use the history brush, you can paint in only the post-choke state, only in the areas that you actually need to put it in. I'm actually going to go to my tablet because I do all of my brush work actually with my tablet. You don't need to go to your tablet right this second unless it's handy, because you can still do this with a mouse. I am going to select my history brush now. It's the tool icon right underneath the clone stamp tool. Click on that. You'll see it is history brush. In the history brush, I'm actually going to, hardness doesn't really matter in this because the state is what is really controlling what you see. So you don't really need to worry about it whether it's a hard brush or a soft brush. You do want to make sure that the blending mode of this brush though is set to normal, 100% opacity and 100% flow. And then I'm actually going to make mine a little bit smaller. I'm going to start in this area right here of her hand that's got that green part. Again, you need to be doing this on your layer mask because this is what we're changing, is the history state of the layer mask. And I'm simply going to click and knock that whole part out. That's gone. I'm going to do the hand that's actually in the middle. I'm going to do the outside edge of her hand as well. Spacebar will allow me to move this and get that. That part's all good. I'm looking at her sleeve. That part's all good. I'm just holding down the spacebar and dragging. If you felt like this edge right in here needed a little bit of choking on here, I can barely see a little bit of green in here. You can simply run your history brush along that. It will actually pull in that choke as well. Stay away from her hair and from the boa stuff. On the other side though, where it's light over here, I actually do see that line. So I am going to paint in the choke of this whole state along this line. It's more sensitive where it's really lit up. Now I'm zoomed in at 400%. You can zoom out a little bit on this and use a little bit larger brush and do this quicker. I'm going to look at the inside of her arm. I don't think I see anything in there. I don't. It's still primarily on the outside of her arm, and it's probably going to be on the outside of her hand. It is. I'm going to get rid of all of that. And I'm going to do the other side as well. That part all looks good. The stockings look good. All of that looks pretty good down until I get down to her feet. So when I get down to her feet, and you can also, the dreaded battery low. So I'm going to do the rest of this. So to fix this part, I am going to go to my path palette. I'm going to hit the P key to get the pen tool, and I want to outline her shoes. This is what I want to do. It's just faster for me to get this part. So I'm going to start on the background part of her shoe up here. I'm simply going to click and drop down a point, and I'm going to start to click and drag to actually get this to curve and to come around. I typically do not include the shadows underneath feet when I do this. I put them in later. Command Z if you make a mistake. And again, remember in your pen tool work, you're looking for hills and valleys. And I'm getting up to the very top of this right now, and then I'm simply going to come across to complete my path. So that's 1 foot. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Hold down my Option key to get rid of that point to start again. And again, in this part right here, there is a drop shadow underneath her foot. So I am going to eliminate that with my curve. This part of her shoe is actually curved. And then again, back around. I'm going to load this as a selection now. Command click on this. It's now a selection. I'm going to slightly feather this before I use it. So up to the select menu, down to modify, down to feather, and I'm going to put in a 1 pixel feather. I'm going to do a 1/2 pixel feather of 0.5 and say OK. Then I'm going to go back to my layer palette, back to my mask. So in this area right here, if I use a brush to paint on this, I'm going to eliminate her shoes because her shoes are what are selected. To see what I mean, just hit the B key to get a brush. Again, you don't need to worry about the hardness of your brush because the selection is controlling it. A normal blending mode, 100% opacity, 100% flow. Black is going to be my background, is going to be my foreground color. So I'm going to click on this and I'm going to run this across, and you can see It's allowing me to paint on the shoes. I don't want to paint on the shoes. I want to paint around the shoes. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. And instead now I need to invert my selection. If you zoom all the way back out again, you will see you have marching ants just around the feet. There's nothing around the edge. But when you invert your selection, you do it up to the select menu, down to inverse your selection, you'll see you now have marching ants around your image, and now the shoes are being protected, but I can paint around the background. So again, I've still got black as my foreground color. I'm going to make my brush a little bit larger, and I can simply paint on my layer mask. I can paint around the shoes to get rid of that part. I'm going to paint on the other side as well. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so it's easier to select. And that's actually looking pretty good to me. Command D to deselect, and those shoes are done well. I've still got a problem where the fur is meeting the floor. So for that, I'm actually going to use my overlay brush. So again, B key is still selected. Change your blending mode from normal down to overlay. If you take a look at your, I'm just going to hold down my option key to look at my layer mask. The floor here actually needs to be black. The fur right now is white, so my overlay brush should work fine on this. So again, it's set to overlay. White, black is my foreground color. So now when I paint on this area right here, it actually can find out where the edge of the fur is. So I'm going to undo that so that you can watch this in real time and the effect that it has on the mask and the image. So again, I'm going to just paint that line down here. You'll notice that this corner right down in this area right here did not go away. You just hit this a second time with an overlay brush, hit it a third time with an overlay brush, and a fourth time, and you got rid of all of that. I'm going to continue to work my way over. A lot of people missed this part. They left this little bit of floor right here, hit it a second time, hit it a third time, hit it a fourth time, hit it a fifth time, hit it a sixth time, hit it a seventh time. If you cannot get it after 7 times, you can zoom in like this. I could go after this with the pen tool. Instead, I'm going to change my brush back to a normal blending mode. I'm going to make it a completely hard brush. And I'm just going to tap this area, just using the tangent of my brush to actually hit those parts. And that's how I would work my way around this. Double click on the hand, and then finally, once I get all of this cleaned out, I can just use a regular brush, or I can use the selection tool. I'll show you what I mean by the selection tool. Sorry, hang on one second. Yeah, my screen is something, there's something weird with my screen. Anyway, selection tool, lasso key, L key, still working on my layer mask. I can just select really big areas of this whole thing and fill them with black. Black is my foreground color, option delete, and I'm off to the races. Questions about any of this? Okay. You can close that up. You don't need to save that. So today, I got that done. Yeah. Today we're going to get into the last of the modification tools. So we've gotten through, we've done some transforming stuff, we've done some warping, we've done a couple of those things. We got into Liquify 2 weeks ago. That's a pretty serious transforming tool. But the last one there's one last major transforming tool that we can use, and that's Puppet Warp. How many people in this room have ever used Puppet Warp? Okay. The way I look at that, it's just bad habits I don't need to break. So, if you can go to your class session files number 10, actually inside number 10, inside your session number 10, there's a folder called Puppet Warp. If you actually click on that, there is a there's a JPEG in here. if you click on that JPEG just to open it up, or you can actually bring it into Photoshop. I'll just bring it into Photoshop. This is the one I just want to start with, just so that you have some idea of what's going on here. And I'm going to just double click on the hand. What's wrong with this picture? What? Yeah, well, it's really low res file. But anything else? Anybody spot anything else? How about the girl who's 10 foot, 11 foot tall? At least. Come on, look at typically her waist would be right in the middle of her hips. They have stretched her so tall, it is absolutely absurd, and you guys are looking at it and totally believing it, and you want to know why? Every single fashion picture that's been shot in the last 40 years has been stretched. Every single one of them. So, to stretch stuff is really difficult to do when you're actually in Photoshop. The way we used to do it is that you could take an image. Well, here, I'll show you. We'll actually do it. So you can close this one up if you opened it. The image I really need you to open is the one called Puppet Warp Figure. So when you get Puppet Warp Figure opened up, there's some garbage that's in this Puppet Warp Figure. I've also got guidelines that are around mine. I want to get rid of the guidelines because they're distractions for me. To get rid of your guidelines, come up to your View menu, down to Guides, and then down to Clear Guides. So again, if you want to get rid of your guidelines, you can grab the Move tool and click on the guideline and drag it off of your image. You can do that, but it's easier just to hit Clear Guides, and they're gone. Then I've got some weird stuff that's happening in this image. I'm going to turn off the background at the very bottom of my layers palette. It's just a white background. You can see she's now simply on a floating sea of transparency. But there's also, it's this first of the image, the very knockout at the very bottom. This is actually where those things are at the very bottom. So I'm going to click on my layer mask, hit the B key to get a brush, make sure that black is my foreground color, and I'm just going to get rid of these things that are on the side. I don't want those anymore. Now, I don't want to change. I've got shadows on this that I also don't care about right now. It was for a completely different thing. But you can see that there's a lot of layers in here that are actually making up this figure. If you collapse, all of them are in a group called figure. So if you collapse that, you can see I've got a figure group. I've got two layers of shadows that I'm going to throw away. You don't need those. And I got a white background. I'm going to turn this full figure into a smart object. You don't have to only turn layers into smart objects. You can turn groups. You can do a ton of things can be turned into smart objects. So with my figure group collapsed, I'm simply going to come up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, and convert to smart object. And the reason I want to do this is that puppet warping is destructive. It's a transform. If you do it on a regular layer or a regular group or a rasterized smart object, whatever, it's a destructive move. You can't go in and re-edit it. You are stuck with it. So, and if you do it repeatedly, every single time you transform it, you are going to damage the image. You're going to start to lose resolution. It's going to start to pixelate. So again, always a smart object to turn it into. So now I've got an image that's just floating on a completely blank background, which is exactly what I want. Now you can see that there is still, I was going to say spill in this girl's hair. I'm not sure how much spill that is. I would probably go in and clean that up, but that's not what this whole exercise is about. This exercise is about puppet warp. So to use puppet warp, again, you've got a smart object here and nothing else, and it really helps that we have got this girl knocked out. I'll show you what happens when we try to puppet warp something that's actually got a background to it. It kind of defeats its whole purpose. So with this smart object selected, I'm going to come up to my edit menu, and puppet warping is in the transform group. It's sitting right there sort of in the middle. So again, up to your edit menu, down to puppet warp, and it will actually open up. You can take a look at your options panel up at the very top. Some of you just got a spider web that covered this girl. I do not have the spider web on mine showing. If you want to see it, and we should see it right now just so I can explain what it is, click in your options palette up at the top. You want to click on Show Mesh, and you'll see that you've got this sort of like spider web on top of this girl. Now, at this stage of the game, you need to realize is that this, if you take a look at the density setting in your options bar, it is set to normal. If you change that normal setting to more points, you'll see that your mesh gets finer. And this is something that you want to do, but you also want to do it at the very beginning of doing this work. If you start to do puppet warp and then change your density in the middle of that, it will actually do really weird shit to your image because you've essentially changed where your points are with respect to all the other points in your image. So this is something you want to do. The only downside to this is that this is processor intensive. So if you've got a really slow computer or a really old computer with an old processor or whatever, this can start to take a lot of time to do. If not, you definitely want to use more points. You can also go to fewer points. So if you, again, the only three options you have, fewer, normal, or more. If you go to fewer, you'll see that the mesh gets really big. It's got a lot of spaces in between it. It's very hard to get really fine-tuned control with it set to fewer points. I always work on more points. It's just something that you should establish. If your computer can handle it, this is what you should do. So I also don't like looking at the mesh. So again, you don't have to look at it. We're not going to try and hit any intersections of points here. That's not what this thing is about. That's not how it ultimately works. So I'm going to uncheck show mesh, and then we're going to actually look at how this ultimately works. So I want everybody to come over with their cursor. Your cursor, when you're in the puppet warp thing, is just the normal arrow cursor. I want you to figure out where you think the junction, basically where her elbow joint is on this left arm. And I'm going to just click once there. And you'll see that it puts down a point. It's a little circle with a blue center. You can think of this as if that's a push pin. That's the metaphor that they use in here. So basically what I've done is I have pinned this part of her arm to the mesh. Now I'm going to come over to her other arm, the arm on the right side, and I'm going to click and I put another point right where her wrist is. Now you'll see when I put that point where her wrist is, it's now a white circle with a blue dot in the middle, but the original point is now a white circle with a gray dot in the middle. That means that I can actually, that if you have the blue dot in the middle, you can actually move that point. The other point that's on the other side will not move. And look what happens. I'm going to hover over this and I'm just going to click and I'm going to push up. And you'll see that what ends up happening is her whole body is rotating around the first point. That is because the mesh, if you think of it as a spider web, the mesh is completely anchored to her body. So when I move this thing on the other side, it rotates around that first point, but all of the points rotate. Her feet are moving. Every single thing in here is moving. If you then uncheck the show mesh so that you don't have to see it again. So you need to realize that if you want to change areas in here, which I do, I want to change certain areas in here, you basically need to anchor everything else that you don't want to move. So to get rid of a point, and I'm going to want to get rid of this point that's the second point that I actually put in. To get rid of a point, you hover over the point like I'm doing right now. You hold down your Option key, and then if you come slightly, if you leave your cursor right on it, you should get, initially you get a circle with an arrow on it. We don't want to use that yet. But if you leave it still sitting on that point, you'll get a pair of scissors. And if you click with those pair of scissors, it gets rid of the point. You cannot move a point without moving the figure. Again, the points are connected to that mesh. So what I want to do now is I actually want to bend her elbow. I want to move her hand so it's in closer to her hip. So to do that, I'm going to click again. I'm going to put a point now on her left wrist. It is now highlighted and it's got the blue dot in the middle, so I can move this. But again, if I click and do this, she rotates completely around this. Command Z works in this working space as well. To keep the rest of her from moving, you've got to freeze it into place. So I'm going to come up to her top shoulder up on the left-hand side. I'm going to put a point there. I'm going to then put a point in the middle of her forehead. I'm going to put another point on her other shoulder. I'm going to put a point right at the base of her neck. I'm going to put a point at the other arm, at her wrist, also at her fingertips on the very end. I'm going to put a set of points across her waist. Because now if I come back to this original point and move, you'll notice that still things that are not frozen will move slightly. I've frozen the majority of the upper part of her body, but if I click on this original point again and move it, you'll see that her knees are actually moving in here. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. I'm going to then put a point at her knees and then another point at her ankle, basically where the ankle joint would roughly be. That's where I'm thinking about this part. Then I can come back, and you'll notice now the last point that I put down is at her ankle. I need to select the point that's her left, the wrist on her left arm again. I'm going to select that. It goes blue, and now this is the only, because it is the only blue one, it is the only one that will move. So I'm going to click, and I'm going to drag this part over, and I'm going to bring it, and you will see that her hand actually goes behind her skirt. You'll also notice that there's a little gap between the two. That little gap between the two is controlled by, I'm going to turn my mesh on again so that you can see it. It's controlled by this expansion value right here, which is 2 pixels. I've never moved this off of 2 pixels. 2 pixels, what it is that if we had the mesh directly connected just to the very edge of the figure, the very edge of the figure would not move. You need to actually go slightly beyond. That's what this expansion part is about. You can control it. You can make it larger. I don't see any reason to make it larger, but you certainly shouldn't make it smaller. Or again, the part on the very edge of the figure will not move or will not distort. So when I say OK to this, you'll actually see that that space between that where the expansion is goes away. So to see what that looks like, come up to the, there's 3 options, 3 icons that are up in your options panel at the very top. One of them is a circle that's going counterclockwise. What that does is that will remove all the pins, but you stay inside of Puppet Warp. The second one is a circle with a slash through it. That will actually get rid of all of your points, and you will leave Puppet Warp space, and you will go back to your normal Photoshop space. And then the third one is a check mark, and what the check mark says is that you want to apply the Puppet Warp. So go ahead and click on the check mark. You can see that this is a smart filter, which is exactly what we want, and you can also see that that space between her hand and the skirt has actually disappeared. So now I've actually got her hand behind her body. How easy was that to do? The problem that I have with this is that it looks like her arm has been bent. Her arm is not really going at the joint. It just looks like her arm is, it looks like she's got a Gumby arm. So you can double click on Puppet Warp again to go back into it. Your points are all still there. I'm going to add a point in the middle between her elbow joint and her wrist joint to try to get rid of some of that curve in there. So I'm going to click on another point right here in the middle, and I can push this in, and you'll see it actually moves her fingertips because her fingers have not been frozen. Her fingers are still floating, but that's okay. I'm going to bring it back in like this, and I feel pretty good about this. If you want to then move her arm again more behind her skirt, you can do that by selecting multiple points to move. So I want to not only move the point that is selected right now, but I also want to move the wrist point. I want to keep the rest of her body frozen, so I don't want this point that's in where the joint is, I don't want it to move. So to select multiple points, you hold down the Shift key. So I'm going to simply click on, now you can see I've got 2 points that are blue, and now I can actually push this a little bit more. And you can see the area that's between her arm and the shoulder is also moving because I don't have that part pinned down. But this is actually working out pretty good for me. It looks more believable for me like it is right now. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that again. So now this is actually, it looks like I've actually moved her hand in behind this. If you want to see a before and after, you can turn off the smart filter, the Puppet Warp filter eyeball, but that's not the best way to do it. And the reason that's not the best way to do it is that forces Photoshop to recalculate the entire Puppet Warping, and then when you turn it on, it has to then recalculate it again. The easier way to do this is just to click on the smart filter mask and invert it. So Command I, it just hides it. and Command I to bring it back. So this is just a quick preview part. And you can see I've actually pulled this behind her body, which try to do that with liquefy or the regular transform and warping, you'll never get it. I mean, this thing is, when you get this thing right, this thing is amazing. However, you could say to me, well, Verser, yeah, but I don't. She looks like she's scratching her ass. I don't want to do. That's not what I want to do here. I wanted it on the front of her skirt. Double click on the puppet warp tool again. You'll go back into the puppet warp space. We are actually going to, you'll see that I've got both points selected right now. You cannot unselect a point. You have to select some other point or put another point down. I'm just going to click on the one that's by her waist. It's nearby. I'm just going to click on that one. It makes it active, and then I'm going to come back to the point that is on her wrist. Now, you'll remember, you should remember, as we started to lay these points down, I started with the one that was in her elbow. I then added the one that was at her wrist, and then I started to add the points that are on her body. So what that is giving me is the stacking order of points. I started with this one that is actually at her wrist, or the one that's at her elbow, but the ones that are on the left arm, I started with those, and then I moved to the points that are on her body. The points that are on her body are higher in the stack than the ones that I started with. You can reverse this order. So to do that, you come up to the pin depth up in your options palette, and you can see I've selected the wrist point, and I want to tell puppet warping, I want you to raise this to the top of the pin stack. So if you click on the first of the two icons that has an arrow that's pointing up, you will see that her fingertips come on the outside of her skirt. And then click OK, and now her hand is on the front of her skirt, not behind her skirt. Why does this shit matter? You're not going to see this on the video, so I'm going to pause this really quickly. Oh, let me go back to this. Okay, so this is how we can actually bring it in front of the hand in front of all of this part. And this part actually looks pretty good. So now I'm going to show you how you actually stretch things to make them taller. So to do this, I need to make another virgin copy of this. So I am going to, I'm going to make a copy of this whole figure right now that includes Puppet Warp. So in my layers palette, I'm no longer in Puppet Warp. I've checked it marked so that I'm back into my regular Photoshop working space. Command J will make a copy of it, and it also makes a copy that has the smart filter on it. Then I'm going to come down to the original figure, the one that's in the middle, and I'm going to drag the Puppet Warp to the trash. I'm going to get rid of it. So I've got my white background. I've got a figure that's got no puppet warping on it at all, and then I've got the figure, a second figure on the top that has the puppet warping. And you'll see that there's two arms in here right now, so I'm going to turn off the figure that's underneath in the middle. The only reason I want to do this is so that you can have a before and after, and you can take a look at this part really quickly here. So I'm going to double click on Puppet Warp again to go back into it. So I'm going to make this girl taller. I'm going to do several things here. The first thing I'm going to do is actually stretch her neck, because so the two things that people stretch typically in making, again, this is very fashion specific, but you can apply this to anything. You can make buildings taller. You can make cars shorter. You can use Puppet Warp. It's not just about fashion figures, just so that everybody is aware of that part. But to make her neck longer is an incredibly difficult thing to do. So, but you can do it with Puppet Warp. So I'm going to zoom into her face, and I'm going to start to lay down points here. So again, I've just got my regular cursor. I'm going to lay down points across the bottom of her neck, and I put in a lot of points. Then you need to pin the shit out of her face. Otherwise, you will distort her face. So I'm going to click on her chin point, and then I'm just going to work my way up the side of her face. I'm going to hit the outside of her ears. You also need to pin her hair. Otherwise, again, that will distort. The little things that are flying out off the ends, you need to actually pin those as well. And finally, I'm going to continue to work my way down here. I'm going to come down on this side of her chin as well. And then I want you to come really close to right in between these two parts and click. And you will get this warning dialog that opens up and it says, I cannot add a new pin here because it's too close to an existing pin. The fewer points that you have, the faster this thing happens. The more points really allow us to set a lot of points and use them close to each other. If this was under normal, we wouldn't have been able to put down half of the points that we did. And if it was fewer points, we wouldn't even be able to put down that many. So I'm going to say, yeah, okay, fine. I'm sorry here. Excuse me. I'm going to put one right in the middle of her mouth, one in her nose, and one in each eye, because I need all of this to maintain its relative space with each other. So now I've got a bunch of points that are on her head, and I've got a bunch of anchor points that are down along her neck. I'm going to put one more on the necklace right here and one on the necklace on the other side. Then I need to select all the points of her face. I wish there was a way they would allow you to click and drag across to select a bunch of them at once, but there isn't. So I'm going to select the one on her chin. I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and I'm just going to start selecting all the others. And everybody needs to become blue. And you can see this takes a lot of time to do, but the time it saves you when you actually compare this to any other method to stretch her neck is significant. And you need to make sure that you get all the points. Now, all of these points are now blue, so then it doesn't matter which one you select. I'm going to do the one in the middle of her forehead. Click and start to drag up. And you can see it's actually elongating her neck. Now, do not do this. I mean, it is really easy to turn this into a freak show. Do not do that. We are looking for very small, subtle adjustments here. So I feel pretty good about that one. If you hit Command Z, you can go back and forth and you can just see sort of what's doing. You see, though, that the very end of that part of her hair actually is moving. It's because it was not pinned down, and I also didn't get the last pin, but I'm okay with that. It just puts a little curl on her hair there. I don't feel the need to go back and redo all this part. So I'm going to go ahead and accept that part. So again, you can click the check mark to say okay, and then we can go take a look. I'm going to invert my layer mask to sort of see what the difference is. And you can see that reshaped her face slightly. I should have really had more pins in there, but I'm fine with where this is going. It also distorts her eyes, so I would have pinned more around her eyes. Look at her eyes right here. It's like actually dragging down here. It's changing the shape of her eye. So yeah, anyway. But I'm going to make the rest of her a little bit longer now. I'm going to make her a little bit taller. You do this in stages. So I'm going to, again, double click on Puppet Warp to go back into this. I've got the top part of her body is actually pinned at her waist. But what I want to do is I want to make her thighs longer first. So to make her thighs longer, I need to select the entire body of her skirt. So I'm going to put pins down along the bottom edge of her skirt. They run all along there. But I also need to actually pin her legs as well. So I'm going to drop a point right in the middle of this leg. I'm going to do one on her heel and one on her toes as well, because I don't want those to actually move. So then I'm going to select all the points that are at the very bottom. Everybody else is frozen up at the very top. Her arms are frozen. Her waist is frozen. I'm going to select this point on her hem, hold down the Shift key, and select the next point, and the next point, and the next point. Then if I drag down now to make her thighs longer, it will work, but it will also make her legs shorter because her legs are pinned. So if I click and pull down, that's not going to help me. I'm making her thighs longer, but her legs are shorter. Command Z to undo that. Instead, still holding down your Shift key, select the points that are on her legs and her shoes, and then click and drag down. And you'll notice that the only thing moves is her thighs a little bit longer. And then finally, I want to make her her legs a little bit longer as well. All of these are blue pins. I need to get rid of all of them. So I'm going to come up and click on the just a point, any other point that there is. It goes blue. Everybody else goes white. And then I'm simply going to leave the hem pinned, as well as the whole rest of her body. Click on her leg, on the hold down the shift key, her ankle, her shoes at the bottom, and then I'm just going to grab this anchor point at her ankle, and I'm going to pull that down slightly as well. Again, a little goes a long way in all of this. So I'm going to say okay to this. I'm going to double click the hand to kick back out, and now we can actually see what we just did to her. If you click on the Smart Filter mask and invert it, you can see what we've actually done. And this is what happens to every single fashion image in the world if they have the money. One last thing we're going to do. Double click on Puppet Warp to go back into it. I'm going to zoom back into that wrist, the one that's on her left hand, and I'm going to select the point that's actually at her wrist. So there's one other control that you can use inside of Puppet Warp. To do that, hold down your Option key and click on the point. So first off, I activated the point that's her wrist. It's the only blue one. Hold down the Option key, and you'll see temporarily you got this circle that went around it, and then it turned into a pair of scissors. If you do not click, just pull this away, you get that rotation circle again. When you have the double-headed arrow on this rotation, if you click and drag now towards the right, it'll rotate around that pin. If you drag to the left, it will rotate in the opposite direction. So you can straighten hands up, you can bend stuff at the wrist, you can do all sorts of things there. You can do actually the same thing at the elbow joint part. So if we come up and click on the elbow one, hold down the Option key, come away from this, you can actually twist, and you'll see I can't really, again, everything is pinned in the middle, so I can't move that, but it might allow me to, again, get rid of some of the gumbiness in all of this. So yeah, actually, it's not really helping me a whole lot, but just realize that that's not the only thing that you ultimately can pin and move. If I get rid of the pins that are already down here and then try to rotate at this elbow, it will not work, because these things, when I get rid of them, well, here, I'll show you. I'm going to get rid of the one at her wrist, hover over it, hold down the Option key and click the little pair of scissors, and you'll see her hand then drops back behind, because this is now an initial pin here. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to click on the one that's here and get rid of that, and her arm goes back to where it was in the very beginning. So not what I want to do. Command Z, Command Option Z, Command Option Z, Command Option Z. Or in this case, I'm actually going to I'm going to hit the undo all of that part and just return. Questions about any of this? All right, last thing I want to show you is this. You can throw away this layer that we've been doing all this work on. I'm going to turn on both the figure and the background now as well. So I've got both of these now are on, they're turned on. I'm going to do a merge stamp version of both of these so that I have the figure really anchored onto the background. So to do that, select your top layer that is the figure, hold down the Command key, Option key, Shift key, and hit the letter E. It will do a merge stamp version of whatever was visible. So now this layer that's on the very top is the figure literally in the white background. I am going to turn this into a smart object, up to the layer menu, down to Smart Objects, Convert to Smart Object, and then we're going to Puppet Warp this. So up to the Edit menu, down to Puppet Warp. Turn on your Show Mesh, and you will see the problem. You now have her, and the entire background is one. And so when you try to warp anything, it's going to warp the entire image. That's why being able to do these knockouts of anything that you want to puppet warp is absolutely critical. It's the first step that you have to do, because if you don't, if we try to puppet warp this again, I'm going to do the same trick that we were doing before. I'm going to click on her elbow, and here in the very beginning, I'm going to click on the other wrist, and I'm going to move this, and you just basically tear her apart, because the entire background is anchored to this, and she is anchored to it as well. So again, this will never work unless you are able to isolate your figures. Are we good on this part?
So
yeah.
For when you're saying like how they can like grip something or like hold on to something in like the background, would you do this work and then put them into the background?
Oh no, I would put them into the background so that I could actually figure out what they needed to be gripping on in the background.
Okay. So then you do the puppet working when they're in the backgrounds?
Always floating on top,
Okay.
right? So, I mean, visually they look like they're together, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, again, in my puppet warping before, here, I'm going to go back. We'll go back. You can throw away the one that we just merged.
So the background
Oh,
is
sorry.
in a different layer.
I'm just going to turn on the background so that you'll see she's on it looks like she's on a background, but in reality she really is floating on just the transparent part. But now I can actually go in and puppet warp this, and she'll be on the background, and it'll look fine. So again, up to the edit menu, puppet warp, click here, click on her elbow, and I can move her around, and the background just stays where it is. So, but yeah, that's exactly, yeah, cool. Okay. You can close this up. We do not need to save this. Looking like another time for a good quick break here. I've got 3:22, make it a hard 10, be back at 3:32, and we will jump into complex shadows. Okay, if you've got your puppet warp still open, you can close that up. It's not part of your homework. So the next file I want you to open up is also inside our session number 10. It's a file called, the name of it is 940 copy. If you can just open that up in Photoshop. And when it opens up, if yours is like mine, it's basically just a blue field. So in my in an old house that I was in, we actually had the top floor of a house, and I had access to the roof. And I decided one day I wanted to do. I was thinking about. I'm sure you guys have seen it. There's a bunch of people who shoot pictures in like Santa Fe. And the way I always think about Santa Fe is it's just like these white sort of like mission style buildings, and they're very stark, and so and the sun's always shining, it's always really bright. So whenever you have people that are sort of like leaning against the walls of these like mission spaces, whatever, you get these really crisp hard shadows on it. Anyway, that was the kind of the vibe that I was going for. I wanted to do a fashion piece that was actually where I could put people into that kind of situation, but I didn't want to go to Santa Fe and actually shoot it there. I wanted to actually do it via composite. So if you take a look at the image that you've actually got, when you opened yours up, do you have this blue? Okay, so I want to start in the same place for everyone. That's actually, if you'll look at it down here, this is a smart object. If you double click on it, it is the raw file. This is simply a picture that I shot of a blue sky. Now, I've changed the color of this. There was a woman who used to shoot, Camilla Arkins, was a fashion shooter. She was part of the whole. She was part of the whole group that. I'm totally blanking on her name right now. Kate. Fashion model, wave, 90s, rail thin, heroin chic, anybody. Yeah, anyway, it doesn't matter. A group of photographers that lived in London in the 90s who became incredibly famous. Anyway, she was part of that group. She used to do a ton of work for Bazaar. And anyway, but she had these really sort of colorized skies in her image, and this is an exact copy of that color. I went in and scanned a bunch of, well, not a bunch, but enough of her images that I could really pick out how the colors actually were in this. So this is really a picture of the sky. That's what it is. It's a raw file of the sky. I'm gonna hit cancel out of here. You don't need to, if you open it up, you can close it up. You don't need to do any of those. So, however, the building that I wanted, I actually created a model out of foam core, and that's the not the gradient layer that's right above it, but the one that's above that. If you can turn the eyeball on for that one, what this is a picture of is it literally, it is a scale model. It is about this size. It's so about the size of like, like an oversized photography book. So 11 by 14, not quite 16 by 20, but 11 by 14, that's about how big this whole thing is. And it was just sections of foam core that I cut and I turned into this thing. And then I took it up onto my rooftop, and you can see we had plants up on our rooftop, whatever. And I set it up, and this thing is being lit by the sun. So this really is the sun part. So there is, if you zoom in to this really closely, to the edge of this, you can actually see the edge of the foam core that's been cut. So I didn't want that to actually show up. So there is a layer mask on here already. If you hold down your shift key and you click on that to hide it, then, oh, actually I take it back. That's just for the sky. So now the sky is actually showing. I get rid of the foam core on the next layer up. However, the sky was too solid color for me. It just looked like a field to me. So that's where this gradient that's underneath it comes in. If you click on that, you'll actually see the way skies typically work is that they will, as you start to, certainly at noontime anyway, as you start to move up more sort of towards right overhead to the apex of the sky, it gets darker and it stays lighter near the horizon line. So this was just to recreate that effect. That was all that was about. Then the next layer up above that, above the model, is the one that actually removes the edges of the foam core. So if you click on that, you can see those edges go away. And then finally, at the end of the game here, you can click on the one that's got body on it. So this is basically the figure that I want to create shadows for in my background. You can already see that there's one natural shadow that's in this background. This is actually coming from part of the model itself. But at any rate, so I want to make a compound shadow of this. So the shadow that is going to go along the floor of my model and then up onto the back wall. Is that making sense to everybody what the goal in all of this is? Okay. What is wrong with this picture right now? Well, obviously I need to run check layers on this and that kind of stuff, whatever. So let's avoid for the time being contrast and all of that kind of stuff. We can do that later on if you want, but just basically, how about direction of light? Where is the direction of light on the background? Pablo has this right. So the light source in the background is on, if you're taking a look at the image, the right side of the image, because look at the shadow that's happening right here. There's nothing, if the light was coming from the other direction, there would have to be something in this space to create this shadow. There is nothing in this space to create it. So the sun has got to be coming from the right side, outside of the frame of this, across something to cast this shadow. Does that make sense, everyone? So the light is starting on this side over here, the right side, coming in this direction. What about the light on the girl? So when you look at the shadows on people, what do you look at? Or when you're trying to figure out the direction of the lighting? See, everybody looks at the highlights, and that's always a mistake. So if you zoom in on the girl, especially her legs, what shadow, where's the shadow and the highlight on this? The shadow is all on this side right here. So the lighting on the girl is coming from the exact opposite direction. These are now completely incompatible. I've got the light in my scene is going from right to left. The lighting on the body is going left to right. They're the exact opposite of one another. I have to flip one of them. I'm just going to flip the girl. So I'm going to click on body, and I'm going to come up to, so the whole body group. There's a bunch of file layers in here. We're going to turn this into a smart object. We don't have to, but anyway, I'm just going to flip the whole group. So once you make it active, come up to your edit menu, down to transform, and then down at the very bottom you can do flip horizontal and flip vertical. This is a horizontal flip, so simply do that. And she is now in the same, the lighting direction on her is the same as the lighting direction in my scene. So now I'm actually ready to go on that part. I've got a couple of white spot color sampler tools on my image. that I don't want to see. So if you hit Command H, again, Command H hides all extras, so it'll hide marching ants, it'll hide guidelines, it hides those little white points, those sorts of things. If there are things that you want to see, you can hit Command H again, it will bring them back. And if you wanted to, for instance, see marching ants and those sorts of things, whatever, we're going to get rid of these points. So to get rid of them, select the color sampler tool, and then up at the very top in your options panel, hit clear all, and they will go away. So to make these kinds of shadows, this type of shadow right here, right now I want to create a copy of just this body. So to do that, I'm going to turn off, or here, I'm just going to hold down the Option key and click on the thing, on the eyeball that's right next to the body group. It turns everybody else off. And then I'm going to do a merge stamp version on top of this. Command, Option, Shift, and the letter E, and it'll put it's merged everything that was inside this body group. I'm going to turn off the body group so that I don't see it, and I'm going to then turn on a whole bunch of layers at once. Well, not really at once. The Command Option trick works up until a point, and then it forgets what it was turning on and off. So right now, if I hold down the Option key and click on it again, it's not turning anybody else on. To turn all the other ones back on, I'm going to click on the top layer, not the body group, but the top layer in the background set. I'm going to click and simply drag down, and you'll see it will run your cursor all the way down, all the eyeballs turn on, and then when you let go, everybody else is on. So this is basically where I'm going to work at from this group, from this part on. So if you take a look at the quality of the shadow that's already there, it's an extremely sharp shadow because again, there's no clouds in the sky. The sun is incredibly small, very contrasty thing, really far away. The shadow that it casts is actually really strong. It needs to be based on the shape of this figure. I'm not going to go in here and paint this thing. I'm not going to use the gradient tool. Those shadows are all too soft. I can make the contact shadows that are right underneath her toes with that gradient tool trick, but the compound shadow actually has to be based on her shape. So to do that, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the top background layer, and I'm going to add a blank layer on top of that. And I'm going to double click on it, and I'm going to call this Shadow 1. SHADOW1. I'm going to Command J that and double click on the top one and call it Shadow 2. Again, this is going to be my compound shadow. All right, so to do shadow number 1, I'm going to hover over the thumbnail of the girl at the very top that is on a transparent background. I'm going to hold down my Command key and click, and it loads her as a selection. So now this is a selection of exactly this girl, the knockout of her. I'm going to come down to my shadow number 1. In my case right now, my foreground and background colors, my foreground color is a brownish color, so I'm going to hit the D key to get it to be black and white. And I want to fill this selection on my shadow number 1 with black. Black is my foreground color, so Option Delete fills that with black. My shadow outline is still going, so now I'm going to click on shadow number 2, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to fill it with black as well. So again, Option Delete will actually fill that. Command D to deselect. Now if I turn off the figure, you can actually see I've got one shadow that's black and another one right underneath it that is exactly the same thing. So now the way that I actually do this stuff, I think it's the easiest way. Some people will do the shadow on the ground first. I don't. I do the shadow that's actually on the background wall first because I know it is supposed to be, just like you saw when I was actually casting the shadow of the water bottle on the wall back there. It stays upright, just like the girl is upright. However, it's lower. It's not going to be as tall as the girl unless the sun was actually level with the girl. The sun is not. The sun is higher up in the sky, so it's going to make the shadow lower on the background. So that's the first one I'm actually going to go after. So to do that, I'm going to do it as shadow number 2. I'm going to turn the girl back on so that I can see her, but I'm going to select this shadow number 2. I'm going to hit the V key to get the move tool, and then I'm simply going to move the shadow on the background over onto the back wall. And what I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to figure out what about this looks right. If I'm looking at the angle that I'm thinking the sun would actually be hitting her, I feel like the shadow that's on this back wall right now is a little too high, so I'm going to bring it down a little bit lower. That feels a little bit better to me. Yeah, and that's going to kind of work for me. What I want to avoid is, if I can do it, only because it's a complication, if her hand hits this floor, this background, whatever, that's going to start, again, I can do it, but it's just another complication in here. And I think I'm close enough in here that I don't really feel the need to do that. I'm going to goose her up a little bit higher just so that that doesn't become a problem for me. And so this is going to be where I have my first shadow of the compound shadow on this background. Now, I have already built in selections for you to use. So if you go down in your channels palette to the very bottom of it, there's a alpha channel in there, a selection that I've saved called back wall. We need to load this as a selection. So hover over the thumbnail of back wall, hold down your command key and click to load it as a selection. And then back onto your shadow 2, simply add this as a layer mask. And you can see this is now the background of this. If you feel like that you still need to reposition the figure a little bit more, if you feel like I feel like she's a little bit too far to the left, to be honest with you, you can break the chain link between the layer mask and this thing called, and the actual shadow itself. Click on the chain link to turn it off. And now when you click on your shadow, you can move your shadow around. The mask will not move, so it will just, it'll continue to do its job. Hit the V key to get the move tool, and I'm going to bring her over a little bit more like this. And I feel like that's a little bit better move for me right now. So again, I'm just trying to look at this, you know, feeling like, okay, the light's coming down and that's hitting, and yeah, okay, this is working for me right now. So then I need to actually connect the body, the shadow that's going to come off her body to the one that's on the background. I need to make that's going to be my second shadow, or the one that's called shadow number 1. So to do that, I'm actually going to click on it to make it active. I want to see this already masked out because it's too complicated to see it, to try to move it to be leaving her feet, going to connect with the shadow in the background and get it all to line up. So in order to do that, I'm going to, again, hover over this back wall selection that's made in my channels palette, the one that's called back wall. I'm going to command click to load that as a selection. But now if I use that as a layer mask on my number 1 right here, it will only show up on the back wall. I don't want it to show on the back wall at all. I only want it to show on the ground. So I need to invert my shadow up to the select menu, down to inverse, and you'll see now you've got marching ants going around everybody else, and I'm going to simply add this as a layer mask to my shadow number 1. So click on add layer mask, and you can see that the back wall is now black, so this shadow will not show up on that wall at all. So then I'm going to go back to my shadow number 1. I need to, again, break the chain link between the mask and the figure, because if I go to transform the shadow and I still have it linked up with the mask, it will transform the mask at the same time. I don't want to do that. I want to break the chain link between the mask and the shadow. So now I can actually transform the shadow to try to get it to line up on the figure, on the shadow that's on the back wall. Now at this point, the transforms get so extreme, you can lose your control handles. This has happened to us before when we did the floor last week of that man-made composite background. We had to be on the pasteboard to do it because the pasteboard shows you your control handles outside of your image. So I'm going to hit the F key once to go to the pasteboard, then selecting my shadow that I want to actually transform, I'm going to hit Command T. When I do Command T, you'll see that I get my bounding boxes around it. If you hover your cursor outside of the bounding box, you'll get an arrow that's, it's a double-headed arrow on a line that when you actually click and spin it, it actually spins. But you'll notice it'll actually rotate stuff. But you'll notice when I do that it actually rotates around the anchor point that is right at her crotch. I don't want this to rotate around her anchor point. I want the anchor point to actually be at her feet. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that small amount of rotation. I'm going to grab the anchor point that's right in the middle of her crotch and drag it right down between her feet at the very bottom. And now when I do that rotation down, you can actually see that it does, I'm pulling it down so that it's actually lining up with the figure that's on the background, but it's also beginning to, but it's not showing up on the background. So this is the first thing that I need to do in trying to establish this line as it goes to the background. However, my shadow now is based on this figure, and the figure itself is really wide. That would not be happening as the shadow cuts to the side of her. It would not be her full like snapshot of her outline of her body. It would be distorted. So I need to distort this shadow. With the transform still selected, I'm going to actually grab the anchor, not the anchor point, but the control handle that's on the top side of this now, and I'm going to push this down to try to get it to where this is beginning to line up on her feet down at the bottom. It's beginning to line up on her legs at the bottom. However, I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit more. You'll also notice that this is no longer connected to her feet. So I've got to move the whole thing up so that the shadow is literally coming off of her shoes. If you're not getting the fine enough control when you're moving this stuff by just moving it using your mouse, you can actually use your arrow keys to tap just little bits up and down and left and right, and it will fine tune it those movements a little bit more. I'm going to zip back out and continue to rotate this down a little bit more. And what I'm looking for is to try to get these to begin to line up. So in this case, they're not quite there yet. So again, I need to compress my shadow a little bit more. So I'm going to bring this down a little bit more. And they're getting closer to one another right now. I'm going to zip in on this a little bit more to take a look and see what's really happening. So in here, I'm going to actually, again, you're never going to get this perfect in terms of where it's going to meet up with the shadows in the back. You'll see I've got a little bit of overhang right here. I can try to push this in just a little bit to try to get it to be a little bit better, but ultimately I'm going to have to fine tune this thing. I'm going to pull this top down a little bit more as well. So I've got the outsides that are sort of there. The insides of this need some work on them. The outsides are pretty close, but if it's not perfect, I'm okay with that. I'm going to zip back out again a little bit more. And this seems to actually be reasonably good for me right here. So I'm going to go ahead and say, oh, actually it's moved off of her feet again. So I've got to relocate this on her feet again. And then again, I've got to rotate this down more. So it's this whole iterative process, and you thought shadows were going to be easier. Now, the other thing that I also want to do on this is that I feel like this has really truncated her. I feel like things should be a little bit longer. So I'm going to zip back out. I'm going to drag this shadow to make it a little bit longer. And then zoom back in. And rotate this a little bit better. Compress this a little bit more. Scooch it up just a little bit more right here. Arrow keys. Rotate it a little bit more. And that's feeling better to me. So this is basically where I'm going to go with on this one. So I'm going to zoom in and take one class look at this. Again, you guys, it's not going to be exact, but hopefully you'll be somewhat close to me. So I've got the outside is pretty close here. The outside is pretty close on this side over here. I could bring it in just slightly more. Yeah, I'm going to go with that. Okay, and then I'm going to just say okay to this. So now I need to do some work on this. You will also notice that there is a thin white line that's between this and the background shadow. That's actually the width of the selection that is made, because again, I based my floor selection on the wall selection. I just inverted it. You're always going to have this wall, this small thin line between there. It's 1 pixel wide, but we'll fix that also in post. So I've got a couple things that I need to deal with here. I'm sort of liking what's going on here, but I got to zip back out. There's a problem with this shadow. Again, it's not meeting up in the background right here. So I'm going to fake this. I'm going to create another line of this that I'm hoping looks like a believable shadow part. So with the pixel part selected, I'm going to hit the P key to get the pen tool. I'm going to click right on this point right here to come back out. I'm going to come down to about where her knee sort of starts. I'm going to click and drag out to make it a little bit of a bow in there. And then I'll hold down the Option key and click. And then I'm also going to give her a little bit more of a shin shadow, or sort of like, more the lower part of her leg shadow. I'm just going to beef that up a little bit. So I've got the shape that I'm beginning on the outline that I want. I'm going to continue to come right back up the outside of, the inside of her leg. So I've got a shadow, basically a line here that I'm hoping is going to work. I'm going to go to my path palette. I'm going to double click on work path, and then I'll call this left leg. And say okay. And then I'm going to load this as a selection, Command click. Then coming back to my layers palette, still working on this shadow number 1 pixel content right here. I'm going to feather this slightly because it's not a perfect edge in here. So up to the select menu, down to modify, down to feather, and a 1/2 pixel will be fine, I hope. I'm going to say okay to that. And then I'm going to fill this with black. Black is my foreground color, so Option delete, Command D to deselect. And then I'm going to zip back out and see. And I feel like that actually worked pretty good. So this would be my difference. And yeah, I'm happy with that. So then I need to do the same thing on the other side. Now the other side, it looks like it actually got pretty close together, but it needs to have a little shape in it. It's just this perfectly straight line, and it wouldn't really be that way. So I'm going to, again, using my pen tool, I'm going to click on the very top edge of this one, and I'm going to come down and put just the slightest bit of bend in it, just so that again, straight lines don't really occur a whole lot in nature, so I'm going to just put a small little bend in there, and then I'm going to come up again and reconnect my path, go to my paths palette, double click on work path and call it right leg, Command click to load this as a selection, up to the select menu, down to modify, down to feather, a 1/2 pixel just to take that edge off a little bit. Go back into my layers palette on the same number 1 shadow, the one that's on the floor. I'm going to fill this with black. Black is my foreground color. Option delete, Command D to deselect. So I'm going to double click the hand right now and say, okay, well, this is actually beginning to work. I'm going to take a look at where this thing is actually underneath her feet. It's actually giving me an okay contact shadow on one side right here. I'm missing the one that's under her front foot right here. So yours is probably going to be different because there's no way ours are going to be exactly the same. But I'm going to go ahead and finish this off and just do the small bit of contact shadow that would be underneath her foot. But I'm going to do that on a separate layer. I'm going to go to shadow number 3 to do that one, because I need to put blurs in my other ones and I don't want to blur my contact shadow. So I'm simply going to add just a regular blank layer on top of it all, double click on it and call this shadow 3. And then the pen tool, P key. Oops. And I'm just going to click here on the very bottom and just do a small scoop underneath the bottom. And then again, hold down my Option key to get rid of that second control handle, come back around to the front. I'm going to call this right shoe. Command click to load that as a selection, up to the select menu, modify, and feather. 1/2 pixel, back to layers. And inside this shadow, again, fill this with black, Option delete. That is now my contact shadow for that, Command D to deselect. At this stage of the game, I would save my work up to the File menu, down to Save As. And I'm just going to throw this on my TOS folder and save as a Photoshop file. Okay, so this is beginning to come together. It's not quite together yet, but it's beginning to come together. So my next move in this is that I've got to get rid of this line that's in between. So what I have to do at this stage of the game now is I've got to combine my two shadows, my shadow number 1 and 2. The shadow number 3, it's just a contact shadow. It's going to stay there by itself the whole time. I'm not going to screw with that one at all. So I'm going to hover over my shadow number 2, over the eyeball, hold down my Option key and click. It turns everything all off except for this background. I'm going to then turn on the shadow number 1. So now I've got my shadows. If you double click the hand, you've got your shadows that are on a transparent layer, which is exactly what I want to do in this. So I'm going to select on top of my shadow number 2 because I'm going to combine these together into a single layer so that I can modify this as one. So on that single layer up here at the very top, I'm selected the one on the very top, number 2. I'm going to do a merge stamp version of the visible stuff. It's just the shadows are visible. Command, Option, Shift, and the letter E. And this is now my final shadow. So we've got a lot of shadows going on in here. At this stage of the game, I want to put them all into a single group. So I'm going to click on my shadow number 3 at the very top. I'm going to turn its eyeball on. I'm going to go down to the bottom, my shadow number 1, hold on the Shift key and click on that. So I've got shadow 1 selected, shadow 2 selected, final shadow selected, and shadow 3 all in one group. I'm going to go to my hamburger thing. I'm never going to get used to calling this the hamburger. I try. But anyway, the little menu that's to the right of the Layers tab, click on the flyout menu and do New Group from Layers and call it Shadows. Housekeeping, that's all it is. Okay, I'm going to open up Shadows. I'm going to turn off everything except for my final shadow. My final shadow I actually am going to work on, but to do this, I'm actually going to... yeah, I'm not going to make this. Yeah, I can't do this as a smart object. I would like to do this as a smart object, but ultimately what I'm ultimately doing here is building a layer mask to make a real shadow. And if I make this a smart object, I can't do that part. So I'm going to leave this as not a smart object. I may come to regret this, but that's the way I'm going to play this right now. So I'm going to turn then the rest of my figure stuff on. I'm going to turn the background on so I can see that. I'm going to turn my figure on so that I can see that. I'm going to then zip in on this and working on this final shadow, we need to soften this up, and I need to soften this up in a way. Actually, that's true. I do have to turn this into a smart object. Sorry. So your final shadow, number 1, we're going to make this a smart object because I'm going to run a filter on this, but I need to use the smart filter mask on this because what I need to do is as the shadow starts to leave her body, when it's really close to her feet, it needs to be pretty sharp. As it gets to the back wall, it needs to be softer. The only way I can really do that is to have a filter on that, a mask on that filter. So that's what I'm going to actually do on this. So I am going to turn this into a smart object up to the Layers menu, down to Smart Objects, Convert to Smart Object. And then the filter that I use for shadows is not the Gaussian blur filter. I actually use a motion filter for this. So if you come up to the filter menu and you come down to blur, down to motion blur, it'll open up a dialog box and you have distance and then angle. So if you crank your distance way up, don't worry, we're going to change this. You'll see with my distance with this cranked way up, what's happening is that the shadow is only moving up and down. That's the way the angle is set. My angle is close to 90 degrees, but you can actually move your angle so that it crosses the shadow, which is what I'm going to do. So you want it to be to the right and left side of it. Now I've massively exaggerated the shadow here. So I'm going to back this back off. I'm going to pull it down. So again, I'm going to do 0 degrees. So it goes straight horizontal. And then for my again, my distance in here. How much shadow do you want? What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna look at the real shadow that's on the wall over here, and I'm gonna try to get these really close to one another. So I'm at 15 pixels, and my image on the background wall is softer than the real shadow is in real life. So I'm gonna continue to crank this down a little bit. 7 is feeling better, but I'm gonna use my preview on and off to see. It's got to be a little bit more than that. So I'm going to try like a 10. And the 10 feels pretty good to me. So that's what I'm going to go with this. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay to this. So now I've got a shadow that's softened, but it's softened on everything. The part that's right by her feet is softened. As it goes back, everything is softened the same amount. So, but I do have this mask on here. This is a smart filter. It does have the motion blur on it. So I'm going to hit the G key to get a gradient tool. I'm going to pull a gradient on this mask. And what I want to do is I want to hide the area of this blur that's right by her feet, and then I want it to be full blown on the background wall. So again, the G key to get a gradient tool. Up in the options panel, click on the drop down menu. We're going to do this as a classic gradient. In the next window that's over next to this, the type of gradient, I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to open up my basics folder in here, and I'm going to click on the very first one, which is foreground to background. And then finally, in terms of the type of gradient that I want for this, I'm going to click on the linear gradient, which is the very first of the little icons in the very bottom. So now working on my filter mask, I can click and drag back, and you can actually see that there is a dark gradient part right here, which is actually making her feet really sharp. And then as we get to the back, it's actually making the full effect of the filter is actually happening on this. So you can pull gradients over and over and over again. So I'm actually going to click and pull another one. It will simply rewrite the gradient that you put on there, trying to get it right. I'm going to zip in here to see what I've actually got going here. And that part's actually working pretty good for me. And I realize I haven't fixed that white line that's between those two. I'll get to that in just a second. But I'm feeling pretty good about that. The feet are sharp. The background on the wall is pretty soft, so this part's actually working for me. However, at this stage of the game now, I cannot keep this as a smart object. I've got to go ahead and rasterize this. So it's going to bake the filter into it, but it's also going to allow me to fix that white line that's in the back by her legs. So to do this, click on your final shadow, smart object, up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, down to rasterize, or up to the layer menu, down to rasterize smart objects. It does the exact same thing. And now I've actually got this a shadow on here that's actually sharper by her feet, softer in the background, but now I can fix the part that's actually that white line that's right between the two. So I'm gonna hit the B key to get a brush, make it a really small brush, make it a completely hard brush. Black is my foreground color, so I'm simply going to hit on this line and take that out. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Now on this other side, I feel like there's a point right here where these two have come together that's too sharp right in here. So I'm going to hit the X key to make white my foreground color. I'm going to make this brush completely soft. And I'm going to see if I can't just nip that edge off. And that one worked. The other one, I need to do the same thing on the other side. That one worked. I also need to add a little bit. Where these two come together here is good for me. Where it comes together on this other side is not. So I'm going to hit the X key to get black as my foreground color and add just a slight touch to that one. Maybe a slight touch to that one. Yeah, that's better. Okay, we're getting there, guys. So now I've actually got my shadow. However, it's way too dark. I'm going to go ahead and save this file, Command S to save it. I am going to, my shadow number 3, the contact shadow underneath her other foot is correct. It's fine in here. But what now happens that most people do is they'll take this final shadow, they'll take this thing right here, and they'll simply drop the opacity of it. The problem that you have with that is that this is not a real shadow. What you're now doing is you are actually saying you want to put gray on this background. That's not the way shadows work. The way shadows work is you actually lose the highlights and you keep the shadow areas. So we can't do that using opacity. So I'm going to crank my opacity all the way back up to 100%. I need to be able to measure. I've got a real shadow in here. I want to measure the real shadow because shadows rarely, if ever, do not have a color bias. This shadow has a color bias, and I need the shadow next to it, the one I'm faking here, I need it to match the one that I'm actually coming from. So to do that, I'm going to put down 2 points. So I'm going to click again on my color sampler tool. When you do this work, you want to actually click on the sample of the thing that you want to change first. So I'm going to click on the real shadow part right here, and then I'm going to click on the sort of the middle flat wall part of the shadow that's on the far right hand side. I'm going to put another point there. And you can see I'm getting 2 readouts right here, and this is what I was meaning by shadows have color cast to them. If you look at the real shadow, it's reading a 158. I've got more red in that shadow than I have green or blue. I've got less blue. So really what the shadow is it's got more red and it's got more yellow in it. So it's moving sort of in an orangish range. It's warming is basically what's going on in there. I can actually duplicate that for my real shadow. To do that, I'm going to hover over my final shadow. That layer is selected. I'm going to hover over the thumbnail, Command click to load that as a selection, and then I'm going to add a curve on top of that. Once you have a selection made, when you add a curve, it actually puts the curve on with that layer mask. Now I'm going to turn off my final shadow, and I don't see anything, but I have a curve that's got a mask on it that is in the shape of that final shadow. And this is what I mean. Instead of just doing opacity, what I need to do is I need to bring my highlights down. So I'm going to grab the very top corner of that curve, the white point, and I'm just going to start to drag it straight down, and you'll see my shadow is starting to come back. I'm looking at my readouts over here, and the top readout that I have, the brightest readout I've got is the red channel. So I'm going to pull down all 3 of them. When you do the RGB one at the very top, it impacts all 3 of your channels exactly the same. I'm going to pull it down until I get to that 158 for each one of them. Go to my arrow key, and you can get to that 158. So then my red is correct, but my green and blue are still off. So I'm going to go open up the channels in my curve properties panel. I'm going to go to the green channel right now, and I need to pull this down. Right now I've got a 158 in the green, and I need a 153. So I'm pulling it down just slightly so that it gives it exactly the same color. And then finally, I'm going to go to the blue channel, and in the blue channel, I'm reading 157. It needs to read 151. So I'm simply going to pull it down a little bit as well. Use my arrow keys to tap in to get it perfect. So now the shadow color of my new fake shadow is 158, 153, 151, and that's exactly what it is, the real shadow is, and I'm done. The curve layer is how you build shadows. Nobody uses black and then drops the opacity. Black is fine for the contact shadows. There's nothing ever in there. So the little shadow that's in the front of her foot, if you needed to pull that back, I wouldn't hesitate to use opacity to do that. It's so small and so dark anyway, you're never really going to know. But these bigger shadows like this, you'll definitely know or not if your shadows don't match. So again, in your compositing, you need to be thinking about stuff like this. Yes, can you paint in shadows? Sure you can. But then you need to make them the same color as the real shadows that are in your scene. And you can measure those and just hit these by the numbers. I don't guess at this shit. I don't have time to do that. The numbers just tell me exactly where I need to be. I'm not even looking at this, but I come back to my scene and I look at it right here and I was like, well, hey, that looks exactly like it should look. Command H will hide those little figure things and we're off to the races. Make sense? Questions about this? Okay. You can close this up. You do not need to save this. hit the F key once to go to the black pasteboard, F key again to get out. I'm going to close this up. I am going to save mine just because I never know if I ever have to get back. If there's a question about this next week, I've still got it. We've got 2 more things that I want to get through to today. And these 2 things are the next part that we're going to do in here is relatively simple to do, guys. There's a series of recipes you just need to be aware of. I always go to my recipes to do this. I don't try to do this from memory because I don't really do this kind of work a ton, but it matters. So when you guys, we're going to talk about recoloring impossible stuff. So to do that, we're going to soldier on through this, guys, because we've only got a half hour left in this, and that'll give us enough time to get through these last remaining details here. So I'm kind of playing sort of a little bit of cleanup here. So we're going to be a little bit all over the place. So we just did shadows. Now we're going to get into recoloring fabric or recoloring anything really. So if you go back to your student 10 file folder, there's a file in there called Shirt Dark version 2. If you can open that up into Photoshop. And basically it is a black shirt on a white background. Everybody find this? Okay, how can I make this a white shirt? It's one of the hardest things that there is to do. So the same book that had the recipes for how you, oh, and by the way, the recipes that I'm going to refer to, they're right here. So this recoloring fabric, if you save this and open it up, this will show you exactly how to do what we're going to do right here. So this converting a black shirt to white, that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm also going to show you how to do a white shirt to black or to any other color. These things are right in here. So again, you can actually, these are the sort of things that you should be saving so that you've got this in your repertoire. So when you need to do this, you can actually do this. But this doesn't just work on shirts. This works on houses, on brick, on water, on hair, on skin. It works on anything that you need to change the color of. This is radical color changing is what we're talking about doing right here. So hang on one second. I just need to hide my others. Okay, so hang on one second. There's something I think okay. So this is basically how it goes here. So I'm going to start this and go from my recipe right here. So when you open this thing up, you'll notice that it is an RGB image. So again, if you look up at the title of the image at the very top of your frame, you'll see it says RGB/8. That 8 is the bit depth of this. This is an 8-bit image, and it is in RGB. You do not want to do recoloring in RGB. You want to do recoloring in LAB. If we go back to the very first class that we had, and we had the red car that we changed to green, if you'll remember, what we did first was we converted that to the LAB color space. And the reason you want to do that is that LAB separates color from luminosity. The problem is that if we do this in RGB, which is what we're in right now, and it's what we typically work in, what ends up happening is that when you change the color, you also change the tone of the image. I don't want to do that. I simply want to change the color independent of the tone, the luminosity. I don't want to change that part. So your first move always is to convert this into the LAB color space. To do that, you come up to your image menu, down to mode, down to LAB. So again, look up at my screen, image, mode, LAB from RGB, and let go. When you do that, if you take a look over in your channels palette now, you will see that you don't have RGB anymore. You've got a lightness channel. If you click on it, it looks just like a grayscale of your shirt because that's what it is. It is the entire luminosity of this image. But then click on the A. You see almost nothing because there is no A. Is again the A is the green magenta axis. B is the blue yellow axis. You almost see nothing in here because there is so little color in here. So again, I am not impacting now when I'm shifting the color in this. I'm not changing any of the luminosity here. I can leave that part alone. So once you get it done like this, we are going to create, what I don't want to change in here is I don't want to change the labels. There's 2 of them in here, and I don't want to change the color of the buttons either. I want to keep those as they're normal. All I want to do is change the fabric. I also don't want to change the background. So I have already made selections, pre-saved selections for you to actually use to do this part. So if you see down here, I've got a shirt that is complete, and you'll see that the shirt is a mask, and when I use it, it will allow me to adjust the fabric, but it will prevent me from actually changing the color of the buttons, the labels, or the background. So that's what the mask is that I'm going to use in this guy. So I've got that part already made for you. So I am going to come over and I'm going to create a copy of my background layer. So Command J. I'm going to put this into a group. And the reason I'm going to put this into a group is this will allow me to do multiple changes of different colors that'll all be contained in one single group. So I'm going to add a group on top of this right now. To do that, come down to the very bottom of your layers palette. There's a thing that looks at the bottom of your layers palette, looks like a folder. Click on that folder and it's going to add this thing called group number 1. I'm going to double click on that group 1 and call it white because this is going to be a white shirt. Then I'm going to grab this layer number 1 that I just made and I'm going to drag that on top of this white group to put it inside. And you'll notice when it goes inside, it shifts a little bit to the right. That tells you that it's actually inside the group. If you collapse the group, you'll actually see it's still sitting inside of there. And then I actually need to do some work on this part right now. So I've got this part. I'm going to put my shirt mask, my shirt selection onto the group. This is why I put it into a group so I don't have to mask each and every layer that I'm working on here. I also don't need to clip anything in here. So I'm going to hover over the shirt channel, hold down the Command key, click to load it as a selection, come back over to the white group and add it as a layer mask. You can mask groups, and this is now masking that out. If you turn off the very background layer, you'll actually see this is on a transparent background. So then I'm going to click on my layer number 1, and I'm going to double click on it, and I'm going to rename it DSAT1, DESAT1, and say OK to that. And then I'm going to desaturate it. So the trick to doing really good color correction is to eliminate all color first. You do not want to have a color object that you then need to fight the original color. So if we desaturate this, we basically turn it into a black and white image. It has no color. So to desaturate this, I'm not going to use an adjustment layer to it. I truly need to desaturate the color of this layer. To do that, you come up to the image menu, down to adjustments, down to desaturation. This, you don't see a lot of change because it really had no color in it to begin with, but this still is something you would do. If this was a pink shirt and I wanted to turn it into a blue shirt, those are complementary colors of each other. Why would I fight the pink the whole time to do it? I would eliminate the pink and make the shirt blue. So at any rate, this is where I'm going to start in here. I've got this one. I'm going to do 2 more of these. Now I'm going to make 2 copies of this. So Command J, I'm going to double click on that and rename it. Instead of DSAT copy, I'm going to call it DSAT 2. And then finally, I'm going to Command J that one and double click on the name and call it DSAT 3. I'm going to turn off DSAT 3 and 2. I'm going to come down to DSAT 1 and select it. And then I'm going to put a solid color adjustment layer above DSAT 1. So down to your adjustment, down to the very bottom of your layers palette, the circle that's half black and half white, click on this, and we are going to add a solid color. And the solid color that I'm going to put in is a really light gray, 245 R, tab key, 245 green, tab key, 245 blue. It's a very light gray. And you can see now my shirt is white, but I have lost all sense of contrast, all sense of everything that's actually going on in here. To fix that, you need to change the blending mode of this color layer from normal down to hard light. And this starts to bring back part of the shirt. If you zoom in, you can start to see a little bit of the collar. Now we're getting a little bit of this part is actually coming back, but I really don't have the character of the shirt. I really don't have, I can barely see any of that. That's where that's where the next 2 desaturation layers come into play. If you turn on, then select DSAT number 2, make it visible. You'll see it goes black again, but then we're going to change the blending mode of DSAT 2 from normal down to overlay. Again, this is a contrast move, so we are now bringing in more contrast, and you can see it's starting to bring back the actual character of the shirt. It's still not enough. That's why I'm going to go to DSAT 3 and turn it on, click on its eyeball to make it active, and also change its blending mode from normal down to overlay. Now I look at this and say, okay, well that's, you know, yeah, I'm getting the contrast in here back, but this doesn't really look like a white shirt. This is looking like a really light colored, a very light gray shirt, whatever. Open up your solid color adjustment layer again, and you need to boost this color from 245 for each of those channels to 250. White shirt. Yes.
Why did we first do 245 then?
So that you knew that that's not always the number that you should be picking and that it was still adjustable. So this is, I mean, again, if you take a look at this, I'm telling you this right now, you go in for a retouching interview and you do this in front of somebody and their mouth will hit the floor. So, who in this room would like to know how to make a whole lot of money? Okay, who in this room doesn't want to make a whole lot of money? All right, so yeah, it's all of you. All right, so here, this is how you make a whole lot of money. I'm going to duplicate this white shirt, the whole group. So I'm going to collapse the group. It's called white. I am going to make just a full copy of it, Command J to actually make a copy of it. I'm going to open this one up, and what you will typically get when you actually do this kind of work is that you will get specific colors that people will give you. So the reason I've said you can make a whole lot of money doing this is that if you imagine this scenario, we've actually got time to get through this one. Here's the scenario. Somebody comes to me and says, okay, I've got a shirt and it comes in 100 colors and I need you to I need a copy of every single color to put online or to put in my e-com or catalog or that kind of stuff, whatever. What will it cost you to do that? And I would look at them and I would say, okay, well, let me figure this out first. And okay, so this is going to be the way I would roughly figure it out. 100 shirts, right? So typically when you do a shirt like this, I would go into this photo studio. I would set up my lighting. I would have an assistant. I would have digital tech, a stylist, and a stylist assistant. So the stylist assistant is going to be prepping all these clothes. So everything gets steamed out, everything gets prepped, and then they actually have boards that they put in that you can wrap these clothes around. It's, if you've ever worked in retail, retail uses these same things. It's the same trick. It makes everything perfectly uniform. It allows you to get really creased edges to do all that kind of stuff, whatever. So that's basically what's going on. How many shirts can I do? I've got to prep. Again, I've got to prep the shirts, and then I've got to actually put them on what they call a pin board. So pin board is typically a piece of foam core that you put at a 45-degree angle, like to the wall. You put it at a 45-degree angle so that you can attack it with your camera. Everybody, I see people doing this, especially where you guys are at right now. You do a lot of shooting down on stuff. It's really hard to get over shit to shoot straight down on it. So instead, people do it in an angle board like this, and then you can just attack it from being out in the room. You don't need to be like right on top of it. But the stuff will slide. So you actually pin it. So it's a piece of foam core that you pin it in place so that it doesn't slide down. And you can do it, especially if you're doing more organic shapes and that kind of stuff. You can push stuff in, and they'll do a whole set of pins to keep it on the board. You shoot it, and then you retouch out all the pins. So anyway, that's how I'm going to approach this whole shooting thing. So how many of those can I do in a day? Well, I can do 20. So this is going to be a 5-day shoot for me. So my day rate in Chicago to do this kind of work is $3,500 a day. So that's where I'm going to start. Times 5 days, about 18 grand. My crew, my assistant is $300 a day. My tech is $500 a day. The stylist assistant is going to be $300 a day, and the stylist is $750 a day. That adds another $2 grand a day to this. So now I'm all of a sudden up to $2 grand a day. That's another $10,000. So now I'm at $28,000. We need lunch and seamless to actually do this on, all that kind of stuff. Rough expenses, $35,000. That's basically what I'm going to do. That's how I'm going to actually do the shooting, right? keep that figure in mind. 35 grand to do 100 shirts, right? $350 a shirt. So what I really do is I come in, I hire an assistant. I'm not cheap with my crew. I hire everybody for the day, but we're going to bang this out in a half a day, if that. I'm really thinking 3 hours. So I come in and I set this thing up and I shoot the first one. And then I hire my digital tech to spend the rest of the day doing exactly what we're going to do right now. I'm going to open up this second white copy. I'm going to double click on the color picker. It'll actually open this part up. When you get this open, you'll see that there's a set of color libraries in this color picker. If you click on these color libraries, it will open up, and in this drop-down menu here, you have what is a book of colors. One of the sad things that happened in Photoshop, and this is recent, this happened like 2 or 3 years ago, this book used to actually include all the Pantone colors. Everybody in this room know who Pantone is? Pantone, news to anyone? They define color in the world. I mean, they are the people who say this the color of the year. It's all Pantone. So you will get a Pantone number. So when people talk about color, when art directors talk about color, they will give you Pantone colors. Unfortunately, those don't exist anymore in Photoshop. Photoshop started to, Pantone wanted too much money to actually include this in here. So they don't do this anymore. So, but you can do this color right here, focal tone colors. This is the standard that they use in Europe. So you can actually use these colors. You can get a set of these as well. And what you'll see is you've got a color tree that works right here. If you click on any colors in here, you'll actually see that you can come up with these colors right here. They actually have the name of the of that with a number that follows it. So this 192 is sort of like this teal-like color. If I come down here, I've got a 234. You can see that there's all different colors in here. So I'm going to make this shirt. I want to do a shirt that's in sort of a lighter blue range. So I'm going to come in here. If you want to get to the very same color that I've got in your color picker right here, this color is a 227. If I go to any place else in here and then really quickly I type 2227, it'll go right back to this color. So you click on this color to actually do the selection of it, and then I'm going to go back to my color picker, and back in my color picker I get a set of LAB values. These things you need to write down. So I'm going to write down what this says. So in the value for this, again, I'm going to write down what the one was. So it was the color 2227 in the full FOCOLTONE. And the LAB of this is 73 for the L channel, minus 28 for the A channel. These are minuses. They are actually, you have to put them in. In LAB, they do not do a scale of 0 to 255. They do a scale of minus 128 to a positive 127. So this minus, you need to make sure that you know that that's what that is, and a minus 36 for the B channel. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to this. And you'll see my shirt is really dark. That's OK. You can turn off now the DSAT 2 and 3 that we actually put on here. Then I need to actually establish this exact color on here. I'm close, but this is not the exact color that we're trying to go for right here. I'm going to come up to my color picker. I'm going to grab the color sampler tool, and I'm going to drop a color sample right in the middle of this shirt, right where I know where that color should actually be. And you'll see I've got an LAB set of values that are sitting right here on this color number 1, but I've written down what they really should be. And so I'm going to add a curve on top of this to fix that color so that it is exactly the figures that it's supposed to be. So I'm adding a curve on top of this. I'm going to use the targeting adjustment tool. I'm going to hover right over this spot, and I'm going to start with my lightness channel first. You'll see you have lightness, A and B. I'm going to start with lightness. I'm going to click on this point right in the middle. I've got a lightness of 56. I copied down 76. That's what this needs to be. So I'm going to click on here and I'm going to drag this up until it reads 76. My A color is supposed to be a minus 28. The A's and B colors in here are always really close. So I'm going to go to my A channel, click on this, and pull it down till I get a minus 28, and then go to my B channel, which is supposed to be minus 36, and do the same thing. This is now that exact color in LAB. And my digital tech by himself spends the rest of the day doing the other 99 of these. I bill $38,000 for a half a day's worth of work. And if you don't think I haven't done this before, you're absolutely wrong. Guys, I don't know if I've said this in this class, but I will say it in every class. What's the most important thing? We haven't had this conversation. What's the most important thing? Have we had this conversation? Yeah. So we've had this conversation. It's the money. Pure and simple. I love the work. Don't get me wrong. I'm in a photo studio. You know, it's like playing dress up, and I get paid a lot of money to do it. That's great. But don't get me wrong. It is about the money. Questions about this? All right, we can do one last thing in here. I'm going to close this up. You don't need to save it. We're going to go in the opposite direction. There is a white shirt version 2 in here. This one works slightly differently, so I just want to make sure that you understand that, and we go through it really quickly, and we can get this done in 10 minutes. So open the light shirt up into Photoshop as well. So in here, it kind of works out. It starts out the exact same way. We convert this to LAB to begin with, up to mode, down to LAB. Then I'm going to make a copy of this, Command J to jump this. I'm going to add a group on top of it. I'm going to double click on this group, and we're going to call, let's just do the same color. We're going to do this, I'm just going to call it FOC 2227. I'm going to put this inside of it. I'm going to desaturate this up to the image menu, down to adjustments, down to desaturate. I'm going to double click on it, call it desat 1. Then I haven't put a complete version of this together because I wanted to make sure you guys understood how to do this. If you come over to your channels palette, I do have a white t-shirt. The shirt outline is here. However, the labels are here and the buttons are here. I need to put this all together. How do I make the buttons and the labels black in this guy right here? Shoot.
I'm just grouping the paths together and making one whole path selection.
If there were paths, I don't think there's any paths in here. Oh, actually there are. Never mind. That would be a possible way. I'm just going to do it the fast way. So the fast way to do it is to select the shirt that's at the very bottom, the shirt channel, hover over the labels, hover over the thumbnail. You're not going to select the labels, just hover over the thumbnail, Command click, it loads them, but the shirt is still selected. I want the labels to be protected. I don't want them to change, so they need to be black. Black is my foreground color. Option delete, Command D to deselect, and then I'm going to do the same thing for the buttons. I've still got the shirt still selected, the shirt channel. Hover over the thumbnail of the buttons, Command click, load it as a selection, and again, fill those with black as well. Command D to deselect. Now I can load this shirt selection, Command click, and come back over to this to my new color stack that I'm actually working on over here, and add that as a layer mask. So now anything that I do inside of this, again, if I turn off the bottom layer here, you'll see that only the fabric is actually going to be affected because everything else is being masked out. So I'm going to click on top of desat 1, and I've got that part done. I've got that. Yeah. We're going to add just on top of DSAT 1 a brand new layer of solid color. So click on solid color and come up to solid color. It'll open up, and I have these values in LAB, so I'm going to give them to you really quick if anyone's doing this. So it's a 76 for the L channel. Tab key for the A channel, it's a -28. And then B channel is -36. And say OK to that. That is that exact color again. And then I'm going to change the blending mode of this from normal to multiply. So this is now really close to the shirt that I want in here. I feel like it needs a little bit more contrast in here. So I'm going to duplicate my DSAT 1 layer, Command J, name it DSAT 2, drag it on top of the solid color adjustment layer, and then change its blending mode to overlay. Again, I'm just pumping more contrast into this. Now, the contrast that I put into here is like nuking the hell out of this, so I'm going to just drop my opacity way down. So down to about a 30%, and this is basically the color that I've got in here. However, it's going to change the color of the actual shirt. So again, click on my color sampler tool, click on this to actually put a point down. I've got a an 81 for the lightness channel, so I'm going to put a curve on top of my solid color. In my lightness channel, I'm going to grab the targeting adjustment tool, click on this. 76 is what it should be reading. It's actually reading 73, but that's because my DSAT 1 is on top of this, so I'm not going to do my curve here. I'm going to move my curve above DSAT 1 because that's having an impact on the color. You can see it's now reading an 81. So again, I'm going to tear this point off. Targeting adjustment tool. Click on this, and it should be reading 76, so I need to bring it slightly down. My A channel is supposed to be a -28. Slightly change that. And my B channel is a -36. Change that. Do this all day long. Questions? I know, it's insane, right? What?
Like, where do you just learn this stuff?
So there's, again, one of the best Photoshop books I ever got was, so this had to be this is in the late 1980s, early 1990s, in Photoshop version 6. But this is before CS. This is like so far back. There's this book. It was called it's like the Photoshop tool book or something like that. I forget what it is. I've got it in my office. I don't think it's been out of print forever. I don't think you can find a copy of it. But anyway, this is exactly where I learned it. So, but again, all of the stuff that I've learned like that out of these books, I've built PDFs for you guys. Again, you should just please save these things because this will change everything for you. Again, you just don't screw with this. But trying to do this using hue saturation curves and all that kind of stuff, whatever, is a nightmare. It is an absolute nightmare. All right, questions about any of this? Yes? Oh, I just used probably quick selection tool. I may have used the pen tool. I don't really remember. It's been a long time ago. But yeah, any of the selection tools that you normally use to actually make those. I just feel like it's more important to show you guys how you actually shift color than it is making selections. Can you really believe I'm telling you that I'm not going to be showing you how to make selections anymore? Because we've only spent the first 9 weeks doing it. But again, if you can make the good enough selection, you can do anything. Okay, that is it for today. Really quickly, I don't remember what the homework is. Oh, I do remember what the homework is, and this matters. So really quickly, 2 minutes to actually show you what the homework is. In the assignment folder, I'm going to give you some clues here. The assignment, if you read it in here, the assignment is to smooth out the swimsuit of frame 059. So if you go and take a look in your assignment folder, there is a folder in here that's got 5 files in here. There's one that's got a color card. There's this one. There's this one. This is the one that you need to smooth the swimsuit out of. So you need to smooth all those wrinkles out. You need to get rid of the crystals here, smooth out this part right here. There's another file in here that looks like this. There's another file in here that looks like this. So I'm going to give you the big hints, 2 of them. The first one is there's a reason that there are 5 frames in here. And the second one is the best of the solutions, because there's a number of them, but the best of the solutions involve puppet warp. I'll see you guys next week.
That confuses people.
Think about it. That seems cruel. Should I just tell you?
Yes.
Okay, so here's the trick. 2 things. So this is the one that you're trying to fix. You can use sections of others, like this is a pretty smooth section of the top part of this, that you can then isolate and puppet warp to fit on top of this. This one has actually got a smooth belly and a smooth crotch. This is the hardest one to get, is this area right here. You cut out the swimsuit, you bring it on top of this image, this image. You use puppet warp to map it to exactly this suit, right? You then put it all together and then you finish it off using frequency separation, and if you have to, a little bit of tonal retouching at the very end. And you can wipe this totally clean. That's how you do it. I'll see you guys next week.